Coming up, we've got Mitch from the Video Vacuum on. We'll be talking about Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. And then next week, we've got Will from Exploding Helicopter on. We'll be looking at two from Vinnie Jones, The Big Ugly and Bulletproof. And then we're closing out the month with Ty from Comeuppance. We'll be looking at two from Hulu. One is going to be Assassin, Bruce Willis's final film. And then also The System, a film with Tyrese, Terrence Howard, and Jeremy Piven. So look out for those. And then we've already got some in the can for March. We've recorded with Tom Jolliffe. We talked about Army of One, or The Joshua Tree, the Dolph Lundgren film. And then also Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast. He was on, we talked about Replicant, the Van Damme film. So we haven't had Van Damme on in a while, so that'll be coming next month as well. And then just in terms of the DTVC Extra, I'm still into this whole comic book movie thing. And part of the reason why I'm doing this episode today with Mitch was that I've always kind of seen Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance as almost like a direct-to-video comic book movie that was released in the theaters and did surprisingly well. And so I just why I wanted to discuss it, even though it isn't technically direct-to-video. And it's a really good conversation that Mitch and I have where we kind of put that film in the proper context. But I'm kind of still on this comic book movie trip. I've got about like 45 minutes left of Thor: Dark World. I fell asleep watching it last night. So once I have that 45 minutes, and I could actually do, start on our Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 2. And so I'm thinking Thursday I'm going to record that. So have a DTVC Extra episode up on Thursday. I don't know if it's going to be every Thursday for DTVC Extra. Part of that is that I'm still using Thursdays to do my independent movie reviews, and I am planning to do some independent movies for this month. I'm planning to do. I already did The Craving with the Jay Horton film, which I had meant to do in January, but still planning to do one for this one. I think I'm going to do Equal Standard, the movie that with Ice-T in it that I was originally going to do on the 27th of this month, but of course everything got pushed back a week because of me getting COVID, right? So I kind of fell behind on things. So that's probably what's going to happen there, is that I will probably put that one in. So it might be like, I think that would be the 29th, that I'll probably do Equal Standard. So it might be every other week for DTVC Extra, but we'll see. We'll kind of see. We'll see how it goes with me, watching the movies, getting the recordings in, because part of it with the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that as I'm getting into these later films, and I don't even know how much later we're talking about here, right? This is like 10 years ago for these movies that I'm watching. But I'm trying to sort of catch up on all the other comic book movies that I missed from around that time. So, for example, with this one here, I did Iron Man 3, which I hadn't seen before. And I also hadn't seen The Wolverine or Man of Steel before. So I watched those as well, and then got into Thor: Dark World, which Thor: Dark World I saw on cable a while ago. It's good that I'm watching it again because I didn't remember a lot of it. But anyway, so that's part of it. So I think, like, for example, when we get into the next couple movies, I think it's X-Men First Class is the movie that I hadn't seen from that window, where we'll also have Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy. So that'd be like 3 movies that I'd have to watch for that one, and that's roughly what it is. Actually, no, that's right. There's an Amazing Spider-Man movie as well that I have to watch from that period. I can't, and so that's So actually, it's 4 movies again that I'd have to watch, I think, as we're going into to that. So. Yeah, so that's essentially what it is. I mean, I guess I don't have to do that necessarily, but it's kind of fun to watch those other ones to kind of put all of them in context like that. So we'll kind of see how we go there. And I think if they're not connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if they're not part of that phase, I'm not rewatching them if I've already seen them once before. So, for example, I didn't rewatch X-Men Origins Wolverine when I was going through that period. But if I hadn't seen the movie yet, I wanted to watch it just to kind of get a sense of it, better sense of it anyway. So that's the plan. So this Thursday, I'm hoping to get bring back the DTVC Extra and kind of do it like on a maybe every other week basis on Thursday. So we'll kind of see what happens there. Now, as far as the site goes, we just did Deadly Impact. So you saw that I flipped. If you listened to the podcast last week, you were probably expecting the Commando, right? Michael Jai White film, because that was the one I said I was going to review. As the week went on, I actually thought about it and realized, last weekend was, Super Bowl weekend. And in the past, I would do a movie that featured a football star in it. And of course, I had the Fred Williamson film, Deadly Impact, queued up to kind of go after the Commando. I was like, well, why don't I do that this weekend with the Super Bowl? Because, Fred Williamson was on the Chiefs that played in the original Super Bowl. I don't know if you know the story about that. He had a move called the Hammer, where he would kind of some lariat kind of move that he would like clothesline guys with, and he was like talking about how he's going to hit the Green Bay Packers with the hammer and all that stuff, and he ends up getting knocked out in the first quarter and didn't play the rest of the game. So it's kind of an infamous story, but he was in the first Super Bowl. I was like, okay, why don't I do that one, and then I'll do Commando the week after. So Commando will be next week, or this coming weekend, I should say. I do have it watched already, so I just got to get the images and write up the review, so we'll be good to go there. And then the week after, we're going to do Murder City, Mike Coulter movie, Tubi original. So I'm looking forward to that one. I know Ty had seen it. He said it's kind of okay. So we'll see how that one goes. And then of course on the 29th we'll do for our indie film of the week, we'll do Equal Standard, a film that has Ice-T in it. But then when we get into March, I've got some good ones queued up for March. Looking to get some Rothrock in, looking to get more Andy Sedaris, maybe Fit to Kill. Looking to maybe do some Shannon Tweed. Kind of get some good names in there. So we've got some already in the can, ready to go. Some that I've got to watch still. So you can kind of keep an eye on that upcoming reviews watch list. That has some of them, and then also if you look at the watch list, that kind of gives you a sense too of what's coming. I've tried to streamline both of those lists. It used to be I would just kind of dump anything that I was interested in the watch list, and anything that I had watched and will review at some point in the future. Like essentially any movie that I do with Ty or that I do with Will or whoever, that once I watch it, I add it to the upcoming reviews watch list, and it's like I'm not going to probably review everything that I've discussed on this on the podcast. So I've kind of streamlined those a little bit, so they're maybe a little bit easier to manage there. And then other updates, of course, I'm completely drawing a blank here. The archive list, right? The issue with the archive list, right? We're kind of finishing the updates on that. I think I'm up to September of 2023, so we've got like 3 or 4 months to go. And I don't know what that is in terms of maybe like 20 to 25 more reviews that just need to get linked in there. So we're almost completely caught up, and hopefully by next week at this time, that thing will be completely caught up, and you'll be able to go into the archive and find any movie that I've reviewed and click on the link to it. I've actually been using it myself recently, so I've been because for the longest time I was using the IMDb to find my reviews, because again the archive wasn't up, and so most of my reviews are linked on IMDb. Like most of the time, if you go to IMDb and you click on the critic reviews, you'll see if I reviewed a movie, it'll be there. There are a few exceptions. There are a few movies that didn't make it for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because the filmmakers removed them or if there's just something with the linking that caused that issue. But for the most part, my reviews end up on IMDb. It's not anything that I do specifically. They just end up there. But now at the archive, you'll be able to go to the archive and find everything. So that's the key. And then of course, getting back, I still have not really been updating the old post to get rid of the photo bucket images and the links, but hopefully we'll get into that soon. So so those are kind of updates on everything we've got going there. And I mean I'm excited for the fact this is going to be our first month with the podcast doing weekly with guests, and we're pretty much booked up for next month as well. So hopefully February, March we're going to be in good shape to have guests every week, and then again, I can do those Marvel Cinematic, or I don't know if they're always going to be Marvel Cinematic Universe or anything about other things, but the DTVC extra episodes there on those off Thursdays there. I think that's kind of everything that we have here. So. And of course, we have the novels, Don's House in the Mountains. That's my most recent one. You can pick that up on Amazon Kindle. Link is in the podcast description. My short action novel, Bainbridge, my tribute, Send Up, love letter to 90s action. I think that's the one, again, that has the most overlap with the audience here. Same thing. Check that one out in the podcast description. Go to my author's page or author's website. Then my other novels, Chad and Accounting, Girl and a Gun, and Holtman Arms. And again, all those have nice new covers that I created last year on Canva, so you can check those out as well if you haven't picked those up yet. I definitely recommend it. One of the things I noticed is actually when I went to one of the page, I think it was the Girl and a Gun, because I was posting about that one on social media. Amazon actually suggested buying Chad and Accounting with Girl and a Gun. So I don't know if people have bought those pairs enough that it's sort of suggested there. So I'm not saying you have to buy 2 at a time, but if you feel up to buying 2 at a time and you get the Amazon suggestion, I'm always happy for it. And again, if you've picked up my novels recently and you want to shout out on the podcast here, just let me know, and I'm happy to give you a shout out on here and let everybody know that you picked it up. But again, always appreciate the support and the help. People picking up the novels. Again, so always something that's great. And again, even if you're not picking up the novels, people that like and share the social media posts about the novels, that's a huge help as well. So even if you can't afford to buy one of the novels, or it's just not your thing, you're just not really interested in them, liking and sharing the social media posts, that's a huge help to me as well. So I always appreciate when people do that too. All right, excellent. Well, we'll just have John from After Movie Diner and Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. He's going to play us in with our song here. And again, John has a new album out. So Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures has a new album out. So if you're not following them on Bandcamp, you should be. He's always putting out really great music here. And I can never remember. The newest one is called The Ballad of Rusty Cakes. The Ballad of Rusty Crates. Did I just call it The Ballad of Rusty Cakes? The Ballad of Rusty Crates is his newest album. Check that out on Bandcamp. You can get all this stuff on Bandcamp. Bandcamp is a really cool thing. I have the app for it, and I guess the way it works is you have to buy from the website, but then it downloads to the app, and it's great because you got the music right there. You can play it. If it's not Bandcamp Friday, most of the money goes to the artist. Bandcamp Friday, all the money goes to the artist. But I think definitely don't have to wait until another Bandcamp Friday to buy Ballad of Rusty Crates. It's definitely a great album, and there's other stuff on there as well that on Bandcamp that Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures has. So definitely check that out and support his music. But yeah, we'll have Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures play our theme song in here, and then we will come back with Mitch from the Video Vacuum. We'll be talking about Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. All right, we are back, and we are joined once again by Mitch Lovell of Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, so the last time we spoke was we did a True Justice, a Steven Seagal True Justice episode, which was a lot of fun. And at that time, you're kind of still working on the to be continued, but it looks like you've kind of transitioned to physical media now.
Yeah, last year I spent every day watching and reviewing a movie on Tubi, and when you spend an entire year devoting your movie watching habits to something, you let other things slide. So I kept buying movies, physical media movies, but not being able to watch them because Tubi movies kind of took up my entire movie watching habit. So now I have hundreds of movies on DVD, VHS, Blu-ray, and to kind of top it all off for Christmas, Santa brought me a 4K player.
Oh, nice.
So now I have 4K movies that are in the mix too. So I'm trying to spend 2024 watching and reviewing a different movie on physical media.
Actually, I saw on Twitter you were posting some of the new pickups that you got, some that were coming in the mail and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing when you get to be an old man like me, you don't get quote unquote gifts for Christmas anymore. People just kind of hand you money or gift cards. So I've been slowly burning all the money and gift cards down, and it's been feeding my 4K habit.
Nice. So yeah, so I kind of went a different direction because my mom had wanted me to go to she wanted to send me to an Eagles game here in Philadelphia, but the tickets were like $270. I mean, they're just really expensive because it's not like Baltimore and Washington where those two fan bases kind of split a little bit. The population is not quite as expensive, but here in Philly it's just that team. So I was like, I don't want you spending that kind of money because I don't really need to go to a game that bad, but it'd be kind of cool to go see a game in New York, see a New York Knicks basketball game. And so that was what my mom, my Paris gave me like $100 or something like that, and it was like that was like exactly the ticket, and then there's like a cheap trade. So I kind of went a different route with that money kind of situation that you were talking about.
Well, it all kind of crept up on me. I was spying the 4K TVs at Black Friday, just on the off chance that they had one, and on the off chance they had one, and it was like 198 bucks for a 50-inch, and it had the Roku already in it, and the guy's like, he's like, I could either just put it in. He's like, you're doing me a favor if you buy it, because then I don't have to put it out onto the store shelves, because he was just bringing them out at Walmart, like right out of the. He's like, I'll put it
Oh,
in your car right now, and I was like, okay, sure.
wow.
So
That's a pretty sweet deal for
yeah,
yeah.
and I think honestly the only real reason it was that low is because the buttons on the remote are a little dated. They say HBO Max instead
Oh
of
yeah.
Max, and there was I think another one. Uh, there was another button on there that it was a streaming, so I can't remember right now, but like it was like I was like I think they were just getting rid of the remotes actually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it's an interesting thing like that because yeah, that happens especially with the Roku, right? Like I'm trying to think of what some of the outdated ones are on the Roku now. Because I know there's some, right? I'm trying to think, like because we have an old Roku remote from like I don't know however long ago, and I feel like there are some like outdated ones. I can't remember which ones they are. Um, yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, of course, it's like amazing how some of these services once they go away, they kind of just disappear completely.
Yeah, and it's funny how their content kind of just gets like absorbed, like Zumo, like a lot of like the lesser ones. Tubi just kind of picks up all their slack, and Tubi's just
Right.
like an umbrella for. It used to be like you needed like 10 or 12 little Zumo,
Right.
Voodoo kind of things, but honestly, Tubi pretty much is a catch-all.
Yeah, it's amazing what's on too. I mean, every once in a while. So yeah, with my blog, one of the things I've been doing lately is I've been going back to the old posts and removing the photo bucket images and replacing them with actual images that I've taken, just sort of uploading directly to Blogger. And it's interesting when I look at like those older ones to see if they're on, 'cause and when I first started the blog, if I did, there was no streaming at that time. So if I didn't have the movie, I didn't post any images for it. So some of them, you go back and it's like, oh yeah, they're on Tubi or Freevee or Roku. But it is interesting how some of them are on one but not the others. Like it's like I'll look through and be like, oh no, this is only on Roku. Like one of them was Crawl Space, the Klaus Kinski film.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, it was only on Roku. And I don't know. I guess it must have to do something with like, maybe because Tubi's Fox or something. And it's like they have deals. I don't know exactly how it works, but it is weird how like one of them may only be on Freevee or only Roku or only Tubi. But then there's other ones where like you go on IMDb and it shows you what services are on. It's just like this whole long line where it's like, +5, like a few boxes and a +5, where it's like everywhere you can get it.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, especially like things like the Trancers movies or the Nemesis movies. They'll have one or two, but then three and four will be like on a different service, and then you're trying to see five, and five you might have to go to YouTube for. So
Right, right. Yeah, that's what happened with the Blood Fist. When I was doing the Blood Fist for the solo pod episodes, 4 and 5 were not on Tubi, but the rest of them were. And I don't know what it was about 4 and 5 that those, maybe they needed to work out special rights deals with Gary Daniels and Steve James. I'm not sure why those weren't on there.
yeah, and I think too some of the rights get murky, especially when it goes from video to streaming versus DVD to streaming, and some of those deals were. Who knows? They might have been just handshake deals to get stuff in the video stores, and then what, and I can't imagine people, but you read weird things like I think the Russ Meyer movies will never come out on physical media again because he had something in his will that you, like he doesn't want them out and about or something. And it's like what? Like yeah, those movies are classics. So
Right.
there's always kind of weird and yeah, that kind of like leads into like the physical media stuff. It's like it always seems like the same movie is being re-released and re-released over and like all the Evil Deads and a lot of the like Italian horror movies. But it's just, I think that's just because they know who the rights holders are. They can go to them and say, look, let's do a new release, new extras, a new format or whatever. Whereas a lot of those kind of movies that were only on VHS that never made the jump to DVD or Blu-ray, it's kind of murky, and they'd rather just not deal with that hassle.
Yeah, I think that's one of the. I think it's the situation with PM Entertainment stuff because pretty much all of it is on Tubi. Like at least a good chunk of PM Entertainment films are on not Tubi, YouTube. And I created a YouTube playlist of PM Entertainment films with my DTV Connoisseur YouTube channel. I don't have any videos up, but I've got my PM playlist. But I think that's part of it, right? Is that the rights holders kind of thing, like you said, it kind of passed through because I think there's some murky stuff even that happened at the end of PM, like who bought their catalog, all of that kind of thing. And I think a lot of that stuff just sort of drifted into the ether. And then, suddenly it's like YouTube comes along and it's like, well, who's there to claim it? That kind of situation.
Well, yeah, and I think with YouTube, it's almost like a don't ask, don't tell unless somebody, is actively looking to take something down. And two, with the PM stuff, when they're, especially it gets murky when they're using footage from other movies.
Right.
Like where does the rights go back to those right holders, or when they paid to use the footage, if they paid to use the footage, does that cross over all formats? I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because yeah, especially with PM stuff, it's like because like sometimes they're using their own stuff, but sometimes they're just getting stock footage from wherever and just throwing it in the movie. And yeah, that's a really good point. It's like and I think even like with it from a distribution standpoint, I don't think all of their movies had the same distribution deals. I think some of them were like go right to HBO, some of them were going right to the video store. So I think that even that part of it was like they were just pumping out content, and then it was kind of like whoever wants to take it, that's fine with us.
Yeah, and that's true too, because once HBO has something is that in the HBO library, and the HBO library is notoriously tangled with like stuff not even being out on DVD or kind of being like out on fly by night outfits. So it's yeah, it's a you need like a lawyer to figure it all out.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're right about like the don't ask, don't tell element of it. It's like when I used to post MST3K episodes on my old YouTube account, and the thing that got me busted wasn't MST3K. Like they didn't care that I was posting their episodes, or if they did care, they didn't know. But I believe it was the owners of Rocket Ship XM, which I think that's the one. If you read the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide, I think that was the one that Frank really championed, and the rights holders didn't want them using it for MST3, and it took like a huge fight for them to get it. And then it was like once they finally got it, they were like, "Oh man, this was a rough movie. We probably shouldn't have gone through all this trouble for that one." But so that's the other thing too. It's like you said, you never know who's gonna make that copyright strike.
Well, yeah, with Rocket Ship XM, I know Wade Williams. That was one of his favorite movies of all the movies that he had the rights to, and he was the one that kind of blocked them from putting it onto the DVD box sets, and all the other Wade Williams produced movies were, but he blocked them from using that particular episode. Now he's passed on, so I don't know if that frees that up or if it just makes it even more entangled. We'll have to see.
Yeah, because you never know with that kind of thing. Because once the family, once it's bequeathed to, if it's bequeathed at all, right? You never know if it's even bequeathed. But that family, like what they want to do with it, right? Like if they want to open it up to something more. I'm trying to think. I guess like Prince is a great example of that, right? That his family, like he would never allow any of his music on YouTube, and then his family decided to greenlight it, set up a deal with YouTube to put his music on YouTube. But for the longest time, it wasn't available on YouTube. And also for commercials, like I don't think he ever let his music be used in commercials. But then, when he passed, his family started licensing the songs for different commercials. Like Let's Go Crazy. I think you never hear that in a commercial before when Prince was alive, and now you hear it in all kinds of commercials.
Yeah, and I think with the case of Prince, he did that specifically to kind of set his family up after he
Yeah.
was gone, and I think he had tons of stuff in the vaults that was like set aside to be like, okay, when I'm gone, you're going to release all my B-sides and all the stuff that was in the vault, and that's how you're going to be supplementing the income, versus just the royalties.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's like a whole nother thing right now. It's like all these investment companies that invest in royalties. Because I know like, that was like kind of the big thing with Hall and Oates. There was that Daryl Hall wanted to keep the rights because I guess they had sold the rights to some of their songs, and I think when he looked at it, I think the way they're using songs like "Make My Dreams Come True," I think it felt kind of hokey to him, and he didn't like it. Whereas Oates, I know Oates had been in financial trouble before. I think he wanted the money and wanted to sell the rights, and so that's where the split came from the two of them. Was that Daryl Hall didn't want to sell to some kind of investment company. He wanted to keep the rights for them, and that's where the injunction came in. But it's like one of those things where it's like music is like some kind of investment now, which is fascinating, right? Because you can't. There's no money in CDs, but the money, I guess, is like between like advertising and like live presentations or putting it in movies and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, I'm no expert at that either, but I know like people like Katy Perry and stuff, they're kind of like tapping out early, like they're selling their whole catalog when they're like 30 or 40 to kind of just, one, I think streaming, they get pennies on the dollar for every
Exactly.
download. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense when like, especially if you start seeing your careers kind of creep into an end, you don't want to go on tour. It's kind of like Deal or No Deal. You just take what the banker gives you.
Right, exactly. Because yeah, I mean that is like a huge thing. I mean, Madonna is in her 60s. She's still out touring. I saw Mick Jagger. I mean, he's 80 now, and he's still touring. So some of these guys do stay out there and keep touring. But yeah, I can't imagine like that. I even if I mean, I guess with guys like Mick Jagger and Rolling Stones, I guess they do like a limited amount of dates, so it's not the same as like living in a van, or a tour bus for like for a year or something like that. But like Katy Perry, right? She's not going to be at that like Mick Jagger, Rolling Stones level or Paul McCartney level, probably ever in her life to be able to just, I think what did she have? She had like a residency, I think, in Las Vegas as well. So that's kind of like a kind of a combination, right? Where she doesn't have to travel. She does that thing in Vegas and then she sells the publishing rights to her songs and makes all that money there too.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's kind of fascinating that the way, it's always changing, and of course all the money men gotta screw everything up for everybody.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that kind of brings us. I mean, that's a good kind of dovetail, maybe, to our topic today. You're talking about Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, because one of the things I saw about this movie, now technically it came out in 2012. I guess it was like released on like some kind of like movie marathon or something in late 2011, but like its real release was 2012. And 2011 was kind of a big year for comic book movies because you had Thor, X-Men First Class, where like kind of the X-Men series was trying to make a recovery after X-Men Origins Wolverine. Yet Captain America: First Avenger, you had the Green Lantern movie that was a kind of a, I don't know if it was a financial flop, but definitely a critical flop. And I don't think Green Lantern fans were fans of that. And then even Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, it just sort of comes out of nowhere. Again, whether you're saying it's 2011 or 2012, but like makes like three times its return on investment, critically panned, like not screened for critics, but like the people, the critics that had it, didn't like it at all. But yet when you go on like IMDb and also Letterbox, there is a lot of love for this movie there. So I thought this would be a good one for us to chat about.
Well, I mean, first when you suggested this, I was kind of taken aback because it wasn't a direct-to-video movie. But when you watch it, it kind of has that direct-to-video aesthetic. It's kind of stripped down. It almost reminded me of like the old Darkman sequels, where the action scenes are limited. Most of them is just like a setup, and then like Ghost Rider figures out like either flips his whip or his chain or revs his engine, and then all the bad guys just kind of puff into dust or whatever. But it's also kind of like there's a subplot in it where he kind of gives up his powers, kind of like Superman 2. And that seemed like a very direct-to-video conceit of like, how do we get around not having as much special effects? So it's like, oh yeah, for a third of the movie, he'll just be Johnny Blaze. So
Well,
it definitely had that kind of feel, even though it was a much bigger, production.
Well, because you could also add to that the fact that it's shot in Romania, which at
Absolutely,
that,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was, I mean, it's interesting because at that time, like 2011, you were still getting movies shot in Romania, but not quite to the level that you had like a few years before. Because, once the financial crisis happens here in America, it's almost cheaper to shoot in Michigan or Louisiana or something like that. But there was still a lot of productions in Romania. So I think it's another area where it feels direct to video. Also, you get Christopher Lambert, who's like, I think this was his first big screen release since he did Endgame, Highlander Endgame in 2000, which is kind of crazy to think that it's been that long since he'd been in the theater.
Yeah, and it's like one of those kind of like out of nowhere cameos, and you're like, yay, and then like they don't really do anything with them, and then he
Right.
just kind of is unceremoniously just kind of brushed aside, and it's like, oh. And I thought one of the things was reading the IMDb trivia where they had asked Peter Fonda to come back as the devil, and he read 5 pages and he said
Yeah,
no.
right,
And I was like,
exactly.
for Peter Fonda to say no and Nicolas Cage to say yes, that's an interesting Venn diagram to examine.
No, that's a good point because Peter Fonda does do like you're right, like for him to have looked at that and said like, no, I'm not doing this. That's a good point because he was, I mean, I guess to some extent at that time, no, because he was still doing like I think he's in a Fred Olen Ray movie, wasn't he? The
Yeah, the Jesse James
right.
movie, American Bandits, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. So it's not like, so it's not like he would have been like, and it's not like that movie was any great shakes. But like, it's interesting because like I guess the people making the film, which were the guys who made Crank, Neville, Dean, and Taylor, they made the two Crank movies, and they actually like the idea, I guess, of bringing in a new devil because it's almost like this idea that the devil takes people's inhabits people's bodies. But Kieran Hines, I think, one thing I like about him as the devil is it also adds to that, like, when you watch like those Seagal movies that are made in Romania and they just get all of these actors from England to show up in the movie and they, a lot of times they don American accents and whatnot. But, like when I did Shadow Man, when I had Scott Murphy on, who's from Scotland, he was telling me like, oh, this guy, did a soap opera. This was a woman, she was from Harry Potter and all that stuff. And it's almost kind of like having Kieran Hines in this adds to that level that like almost like if it was Peter Fonda, it wouldn't be that kind of Romanian shot DTV movie.
Right, and he has, but he even though he's English, he very or Irish, he's very much like he has that look of a Romanian day player.
Right.
And it just like it just kind of fits with the whole made in Eastern Europe aesthetic.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so maybe what I'll do is I'll do a quick kind of synopsis of it, and then yeah, we'll kind of get in deeper on this because there's so much. I think there's so much here on this movie. So yeah, I mean, I guess the basic premise is that it kind of takes place after the first one, or it's more of a reboot. But you've got Nicolas Cage who's back again as Johnny Blaze, and he what is that? He's trying to escape the rider. He's trying to run away from it. So he goes to Eastern Europe. At the same time, a woman named Nadia with her son Danny, they're being chased by some baddies. And we find out the reason why they're being chased by some baddies is that she also made a deal with the devil, and she made a deal to have the devil's child. And so the idea is that if Danny if Kieran Hines, if he kind of puts his essence into Danny, because the issue is when the devil goes into a human body, the power that he exudes essentially destroys the body. But Danny wouldn't be destroyed if he puts his body. So that's the idea. And then you've got Idris Elba, who works for like a kind of mysterious monk group, and he's helping Nicolas Cage protect Danny. And yeah, they kind of going across across Romania, and then against like Kieran Hines gets Danny, and they end up in Turkey in an area called the Furthest from Heaven, and that's where he's starting to kind of do the ritual. The other thing, as you mentioned, is that Nicolas Cage he's trying to get rid of the rider. He's trying to get the rider out of his system, and Idris Elba agrees that if they can get Danny to these monks, he will remove the rider from his system, and he does it. He actually removes the rider. So we've got a human Nicolas Cage or Johnny Blaze who's trying to fight Kieran Hines. So it kind of comes together at the end there. We also have a character, Johnny Whitworth, who plays a guy named Ray Carrigan, who is killed by the rider, and then he's given special powers by the devil, so that he can like make things decay, which is great because he can't make a Twinkie decay, which was really cool. But that's pretty much it. That's kind of the movie there, and it's kind of how does Johnny Blaze overcome the devil at the end?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a very kind of three chords setup, and they don't have to deal with any origin story, or they kind of do kind of touch upon it. They have like these little animated segments, which also kind of felt like very DTV, very cheap way of not having the hassle of going back and like begging for footage, or paying
Right.
for actors for their likenesses. And so those scenes, like, again, like everything the movie did, it seemed like it was kind of, I would say, disingenuous, but it just seemed like it wasn't really doing the movie any favors to make it kind of comparable to like Spider-Man or X-Men.
Well, that's kind of the biggest thing about this, right? Is that, at that time, right, at the 2011 period. I mean, 'cause I think, in '07, when Ghost Rider, the first Ghost Rider comes out, it's kind of one of the ones I think that was like the impetus for Marvel Studios to start making their own films. Because they looked at like some of those movies and they just weren't fans of them. They didn't like the Fantastic Four movies. They didn't like the Ghost Rider one. I think they liked Elektra, some of those, and they were like, let's look at the characters we have the rights to, and we've got Iron Man. That's it was like Kevin Feige was like, oh, look at the ones we have the rights to. We could actually make an Avengers here with this. But that was part of the impetus, and I think if they had known that there was this. I don't know if they had known they could do this with Ghost Rider. That I don't think anybody expected this movie to do the kind of numbers that it did. I don't think any of the comic book movies that came out in 2011 with Ghost Rider did three times their budget. I don't think any of them made that kind of money. So it is a really fascinating movie, but it is kind of like, I don't want to say it's like yeah, kind of what he did in the '07 one compared to this one. Yeah, I don't think anybody had any real expectations for it, and it was kind of a shock that it was did as well as it did.
Well, too, I mean, I think the original was treated as like a tentpole movie. I think I think the trailer was attached to like Spider-Man 3, because I remember seeing Spider-Man 3 and they played uh the trailer for the original, and people were applauding like when Ghost Rider rides down the building and like all the windows are shattering. Like people are like jacked to see that. And I think and I like the original Ghost Rider. I think it's has this wacky tone of, it knows that it's a comic book movie and it embraces it. You've got like Sam Elliott riding a flaming zombie horse. They're just these like you have Peter Fonda's the devil. You have Nicolas Cage kind of like really kind of working on all cagey cylinders. And whereas this one, it felt like a purposeful, whether it was a budgetary reason or like just, it seemed like, okay, let's strip everything down to the core essentials, which isn't a bad idea, because Ghost Rider probably works better as almost like a serialized, like the old Incredible Hulk show, like going into town helping somebody week to week. But it's not burdened with any origin story. It's it can kind of do its own thing, and that was one of the good things with the 20th Century Fox movies, not of the 2000s, not being connected to the overall picture of the Marvel movies, is like they could do their own thing and not have to worry about, oh, is that going to mess up the Avenger movie, or is that going to screw up when Spider-Man shows up? Yeah, so it kind of allowed the filmmakers to kind of do their own riff on the material.
Yeah, because that's a really great point. Because what happens, right, at the time that this movie comes out, Marvel is putting together this 6 movie arc that's building to the Avengers movie, and it's unique at that time, right? Nobody had ever really seen that kind of thing happen before. It was usually all of the movie series were self-contained, and part of that, I think had to do with how Marvel marketed their movies, right? Like you could only have this character or this character. You couldn't have these other characters, that kind of thing. But it was a unique thing at the time, and everybody really liked it, right? Everybody gravitated towards it. And I think it's where Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance almost like gets lost in the shuffle, right? Because it's like it comes out the same. I mean, if it comes out in 2012, if you think of it coming out in 2012, it's essentially coming out the same year as Avengers, and just before Avengers comes out. And I mean, it had a very limited studio run, I think, here in the United States, but did really great worldwide. But Avengers changes the game because now there's this idea of like, oh, we've got to always do these large arcs, and then DC gets involved doing these large arcs. And then, I think it works if you're doing like 6 movies at a time, but then you get to 11 movies, then you get into TV series, and there's like a law of diminishing returns. And I think Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance kind of showed where Marvel and Disney, if they had thought of it or wanted to do it, they could do these sort of one-shot movies that, like you said, they don't, maybe they're kind of canon, maybe, or even not even worrying about canon at all, right? Let young people that are complaining or debating on Twitter decide if the movie's canon or not. But they could have done these movies, right, and kind of just released them and made whatever they made off of them. But at the time, I think they were looking at it as like, no, we've unlocked the secret here, right? We know how to make these movies work now, and we're going to keep working on this pattern here. And it is almost kind of, you wonder if now they're going to maybe look. I mean, I doubt they're going to look at Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance and say, oh, this could be a template for us to like kind of fix things after what happened with the Marvels and that kind of thing. But like you said, there is a space for these one-offs because comic books have one-offs and TV shows have one-offs, and it would be nice if they kind of went back to that a bit.
Well, 2 years now, they had the Werewolf by Night Halloween special, and that was a really cool kind of like very much like this movie. It's kind of horror themed. It was even in black and white, and it was kind of like a tribute to the old Universal movies of the 40s, and even had surprise celebrity cameos, and it did its thing within an hour. It wasn't really connected to the overall Marvel universe, but it was a nice little like, oh, okay, like that's kind of how they used to do things. And I think now, I think part of the problem, to your point of Marvel like making these overall arcs and stuff, that is that the fans have come to expect it. And back in the day, we were just happy, man. If Iron Man had a cameo at the end of the Incredible Hulk, that was enough to like make everybody cheer. And now it's like they've come to expect a certain level of crossovers and how this show like figures into the next movie phase, and honestly, I think they do need to take a cue from these earlier 2000 movies and just kind of let the movies do their own thing.
Yeah, because I mean, especially this Marvel Knights banner that this movie was made under, and then also Punisher Warzone, which came out in '08, didn't do anywhere near as good as this movie. I can't remember what its numbers were, but it was like I think it was like maybe like 10 or 12 million or something like that. It was not anywhere close to what Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. But it's almost like they've completely abandoned this Marvel Knights thing, which I think part of the issue too, right, is that I don't think they ever fully understood what to do with Ghost Rider or Punisher. Punisher, of course, they used in the Netflix series, which they've now kind of, I guess, I think they want to go back to that, the John Bernthal Punisher. But I think the problem is that, like you talked about, they're kind of like with like this the '07 Ghost Rider. They're trying to kind of make a big tent movie, and you want to make movies that like kids can watch and then go out and buy everything, right? They want to buy all the figures and all that stuff. And the thing about Ghost Rider, I remember when I read his comics as a kid, is that in the comics he looked pretty innocuous, right? It was a skull, but it's kind of like a Skeletor kind of skull with flames and all that stuff, and it looks kind of cool in the comics. But in a movie, right, to make that look good, it's got to be scary for a kid. And I think there was this kind of fear of like, well, what do we do with Ghost Rider? Like, we don't want to scare the kids who are kind of turning into like, big major fans who are going to grow up with this stuff and just keep coming back to it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's just the original design is just so amazingly cool.
Yeah.
A guy that's a skull with his head on fire, riding a motorcycle on fire, wielding a chain. I mean, it's just cool.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think the first movie kind of figured out how to kind of make it kind of poppy, but at the same time, have scenes that were kind of darker, like when he does the penitence there and he like scares the guy to death. And this one, it was like like the first movie, he kind of looks like almost like flaming carrot. It's like CGI, like video game CGI flames. And this one, he kind of looks like a tire fire. It's smoky. It's not nearly as kind of elaborate, but that was that kind of fed into the whole kind of down and dirty vibe, which I appreciated. And yeah, there's also the scene where he like hops into a crane and the flame power or whatever transfers into the crane and he's knocking stuff over and there's flame shooting out of the crane. And yeah, it was like little touches like that always kind of kept the movie afloat.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because that idea, right, that whatever he rides, he turns into a flaming vehicle like that, and I thought that was a really cool touch as well. It's the kind of thing that I wouldn't have thought about, I wouldn't have thought to do. But the fact that they did it, I thought was really cool. And I think, like you might that point you make about Ghost Rider. I mean, Ghost Rider, I think, in terms of like the tiers of Marvel characters, he's probably like maybe in that second, third tier of Marvel characters. But he's really cool. But like you almost have to be more into comics to know Ghost Rider versus like Spider-Man, where you just kind of everybody knows Spider-Man kind of thing. But what's interesting, right, is that Iron Man and it definitely Thor. I think Thor more so. I was kind of saying this when I did Thor on the solo episode that like growing up, and I don't know if this was kind of the same for you, but like Thor was like that comic that like if you went to a yard sale and like there are older people whose kids that were born in the 60s, they'd have like Thor and Sergeant Rock and all of that kind of stuff. And it was like, I don't want this. I want like Spider-Man or X-Men or something like that. And the fact that they've turned Thor into this huge like moneymaker. I mean, he was the joke that, the Adventures in Babysitter quirky sister, was obsessed with Thor. That was like the joke. So it's kind of amazing they were able to do that over someone like a Ghost Rider.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, growing up, like I remember actually the first issue of Ghost Rider I ever bought on the stands was the last issue. And I was like, "Oh, this is the last issue. Like I'm finally getting into this comic." And but yeah, I found others like, going through thrift stores and flea markets and stuff like, I slowly built up a collection. But yeah, Thor was one that I was never interested in, and I think you need. I think that was to the movie maker's advantage because you take, especially with like Guardians of the Galaxy, it's those that and Thor aren't movies that their casual moviegoer is going to pick apart. They kind of freeze them up to do their own thing while still connecting them to Marvel, whereas everybody knows Spider-Man's origin story, and if you try to fiddle with it, you're going to have not only the nerds but just the casual moviegoers being like, "Hey, wait, that's not like the comic."
Yeah, that's a good point because remember that's what killed X-Men Origins Wolverine, right? When they played with Deadpool and they kind of found out the hard way about which I would say like I can't even imagine how you have a movie with Wolverine, Deadpool, and Gambit and you can't sell you can't make that thing successful. But that's that idea, right? Like that everybody knows who Deadpool is, and if you make it a different Deadpool, no one's going to whereas like yeah, I mean Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't even know any of those characters. I remember the raccoon guy. And I remember Yondu because I think he'd be on like the cover. But Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of the same thing as Thor. It was like that was like one of those books that would like they try to run it for a year and nobody would subscribe to it, nobody would buy it. They'd end it and then they try to bring it back. I think like a writer or artist at Marvel would like convince them to give it another try. And I've got a new spin on it that I think would work, and none of it ever worked. But I think you're right. Like it's like one of those things where it's almost like Marvel had like kind of the magic touch with these movies at that time where they were just pulling these characters that like we just never really didn't really concern us. I mean, Ant-Man's another one which I wasn't as successful, but it's still kind of that idea that like a Thor or a Guardians of the Galaxy movie is doing better than a Wolverine movie just seems so crazy, or a Spider-Man movie.
And I think too, some of it is the pairing of the actor with the character. Like Chris Hemsworth is amazing as Thor.
Yeah.
He has that right amount of like kind of the foolhardy braggart, but with also the lunkhead bodybuilder. I think the I think it's just really who you get as those characters that really kind of sells it to the audience. Like Chris Pratt as Star Lord and Guardians of the Galaxy, he's hilarious. And yeah, right from the beginning when he does the little dance in the beginning of the movie, it kind of just sets the table for the whole franchise. Really, like this is a goofy guy. He's in space and he's got a bunch of goofy alien friends, and you just latch on to that, and you really need uh, like an actor that maybe not a household name or like a big star, but a lot of times those are the guys because they're the most hungry for a role that can really sink their teeth into those characters.
Yeah, because that's a good point. Because I think with Iron Man, obviously Iron Man might be the best example of this, right? That Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark might have been the best of all of those. Because it's almost like he brought this depth to that character. That, I mean, again, I didn't really know Iron Man. Iron Man was another one that was like, oh, is he going to be in in a Spider-Man comic or something like that? It wasn't like I was collecting a lot of Iron Man, but it was kind of that idea. And I think it was almost like a combination of like everybody got to see that like Jon Favreau and the producers and everybody were letting uh, uh, Robert Downey Jr. really play with the space and really, 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 do different things with the character and not be so confined to it. And then I think other actors kind of got on board. I think, like you said, like a Chris Pratt looked at it as like, oh, this is a really great opportunity for me. I can, and that's the thing, like with comic book movies, it used to be, it wasn't like an opportunity thing, right? It was an established actor, right? We're getting, and with Iron Man, you look at the history of Iron Man, Nicolas Cage and Tom Cruise were both supposed to do that role before they gave it to Robert Downey Jr. But most of these are they get like a big name, a big established name to play the part, and whereas in this case it's like, no, this is an opportunity for me to kind of, and of course, for all of these ones that came in those first two phases of the Marvel universe, they all made out really well by being in those films.
And I mean, and it kind of, as a parallel course to that, you look at Hugh Jackman, who nobody knew.
Right.
And in fact,
Yes.
he was hired well into production because DeGray Scott was stuck doing Mission Impossible 2. So you had a completely unknown, and I think a lot of his scenes, he's not acting against the person he's in the scene with. A lot of the time, they shot it over the shoulder or whatever. And if he's talking to Patrick Stewart filmed his scenes like 2 or 3 months before,
Right.
and so you have a guy who just comes in and just owns that character, and you have a 10 movie franchise. And I think what really works about the X-Men movies is what works with Ghost Rider, what we were talking about, is like they're not beholden to all the rules of the Marvel movie. They have their own rules. And I know they're at some point they will put the X-Men into the Marvel universe, but I kind of like knowing that in the X-Men movies, they're the only ones that are different. And that sells their plate a lot more. Now, if you have everybody has superheroes, then what's the point of having uh, superpowers if everybody has them? So it kind of like adds to that outsider uh, feel that the X-Men have always had and really need to kind of sell them as characters.
Yeah, that's a great point because really what it took to fell that franchise was X-Men Origins Wolverine, and they had to kind of regain the trust of their audience because X-Men First Class, which I thought was a better movie than Thor, which came out around that same time. I liked X-Men First Class better, but it didn't do as well because I think audiences didn't trust it. Right? They were like, I don't know if I want to come back to these Fox X-Men movies after what you did with X-Men Origins Wolverine. They do come back. I think the last one didn't do well at all, the Dark Phoenix ones, but the other ones did. And of course Deadpool did well as well. And it's so you're right. Like it is kind of a scary thing to think about, like what it's going to mean, because they're kind of this whole idea with like the multiverse thing and all of that stuff, where they want to try to bring these X characters into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you wonder, like again, like we were talking about, like even if the X-Men are kind of more separate, but then like you bring in a Spider-Man for a movie, like he just tags along at the end, like that, that would sometimes happen with like a 3 or 4 book arc, right? That Spider-Man would just show up and be like, help them out or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be part of like this big greater build up to an Avengers thing. I mean, unless they want to do like Avengers versus X-Men, that could be kind of a cool a cool thing there. But that would be like like you said, it's going to be interesting now that they kind of have everything, right? I think they've got the rights, because I know they got the rights back for Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. So I guess it's everything but the Spider-Man stuff, and Spider-Man himself is part of their stuff, but then like the rest of the Spider-Verse is kind of sticking with Sony. So I guess that's the only thing that Disney doesn't have now.
Yeah, I think they have to work out individual deals for each movie that comes out. So And I think it basically comes down to, well, if you get Tom Holland for this one, then we get Tom Hardy for that one. I think it's like a tit for a tat. But yeah, it'll be interesting because like the Madam Web movie, I'm not really looking forward to, even though I'll probably see it. And like the Craven movie, which I wasn't really looking forward to because I couldn't really think of Aaron Taylor Johnson as Craven, but then I saw him in Bullet Train. I was like, oh, okay, that's Craven. Like his whole character and swagger in that movie is Craven. I'm like, okay, well, they obviously knew something I didn't know. So I'm actually looking kind of forward to that one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the thing with Craven, I think one of the things about Craven is like Craven and Kingpin, right? Those are the two Spider-Man baddies that, like the old TV show that was in the 70s, they could have used Craven or Kingpin as those baddies. And it's interesting too, right? That I guess the way that they packaged Kingpin was that Kingpin was packaged with Daredevil and not Spider-Man. So he wasn't considered part of the Spider-Man villains gallery, even though I think he got his first appearance in Spider-Man. So it's like, again, it's interesting how those things are packaged. But like you said, yeah, the Craven one's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously the Morbius one didn't do well at all. But I also don't know what they were going for with the Morbius one. I think they just thought, well, we've got Jared Leto in it. That should be enough for people to want to watch it. But I don't know that there was any kind of hook to it. I guess that's the question with the Craven one. Are they going to maybe sell that one better? Maybe look at what they did wrong with the Morbius one.
Well, in Morbius too, it's kind of like that horror element that Ghost Rider has, and it's like, honestly, like if they when they finally reboot Blade, I think they need to just go R-rated just for somebody to say, okay, like this is for adults. And I think that's what's kind of scaring off some of like the older moviegoers, is they see these movies as kind of like kids movies now, whereas before there was like Punisher and I won't say Man Thing because I don't know who they made that one for, but like there was a market for R-rated comic book movies, and I mean the kids are going to sneak in anyway, so it doesn't really you know what I mean. And I think if the Marvel execs come down on high, say, oh, everything's got to be PG-13, it kind of hamstrings not only the character but the filmmakers from trying to kind of give something more to the audience than just like another day at the Marvel office.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the shifts that they're making, I think, based on the past year, where they're kind of leaning back into those old Netflix shows that they got the rights to, and putting them on Disney Plus, making them available, but also kind of saying like, okay, these are part of the canon. Which again, whether it's canon or not, I think the fact that Disney and Marvel is saying like, okay, these R-rated TV shows, the fact that we're going to make them officially part of the MCU, I think it is a big step forward. But then, like you said, like it with the Punisher, I mean, Deadpool, I guess is the other one that they're gonna lean into being R-rated, and I think they kind of know, right, that they can't get away with making that one PG-13, right? And I don't think it is, right? Deadpool 3, I think that one's
No.
R-rated.
But it just seems like but this also has to fit the character. I don't think anybody wants a R-rated Spider-Man movie.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah, but like if you try to do Punisher on a PG-13, like it's no, that's not going to work either. And I mean, even Daredevil is kind of pushing it. I mean, but Daredevil, I mean, I'm one of the few who actually like the Ben Affleck that Daredevil because it's that it shows that transition, because before Frank Miller came along, Daredevil was goofy. Like it
Yes.
wasn't like it wasn't like he was almost like the C grade Spider-Man. And I like that they kind of start off with that, with like the playground fights, because that's all like stuff you would see in like old John Romita Spider or Daredevil comics and stuff. So and then you do see, then it does bring you into the Frank Miller era where everything gets dark and broody and stuff. So I kind of like that, but it felt like they tried to do a little too much with it. And I thought Michael Clark Duncan was great as Kingpin, and it's a shame. I mean, I think Vincent D'Onofrio does a good job on the show, but I mean, it was like one of those, and Colin Farrell as Bullseye. I mean, I was like, I mean, the and Affleck's not bad, but like, I mean, that's one of those movies where it's like a movie's only as good as its villain, and that had some really good ones.
Yeah, that was a really because that was an interesting thing. Yeah, thinking about like those the Marvel movies at that time that usually, right, a Marvel movie at that time would have one villain. I guess the X-Men they kind of had like a because it was a team of X-Men, they wanted a team of baddies to kind of, the Brotherhood of mutants, I think, right? Where they, Magneto has a team versus the X-Men team. So in that case, they had more than one baddie. But really, right, when you look at these movies, it's usually one baddie at a time. And the fact that, Daredevil comes in and is like, no, we're going to have Kingpin, we're going to have Elektra, who's maybe a baddie, maybe not a baddie, and we're going to have Bullseye come in and kind of put them all together and have Daredevil fight them all. It was a really, really good idea. I think it is interesting. I think it's again one of those ones, and this is again this was this is 20th century. Actually, Fox had Daredevil, not Columbia, but it's one of those ones where like now because the whole canon thing or whatever, it's almost like that's kind of like lost to time, right? Like we don't people don't talk about that Daredevil as much because now it's like, well, the TV show and Charlie Cox and that's the one that people focus on more.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, when you get into the whole multiverse thing, like, that I've heard rumors that Elektra's Jennifer Garner is going to be in Deadpool, and they're going to bring back a lot of the 20th Century Fox people. So, I mean, and honestly, unless it's serving the movie, it's just kind of fan service. Like, I think Spider-Man No Way Home did a really good job of making it, kind of work for not only the movie but also the characters past and present. It finally gave Andrew Garfield like his third movie final arc to kind of redeem his character for when he gets to save MJ. So I think, in Deadpool 3, when they do it, it's almost like, a Mad Magazine spoof anyway. So
Yeah.
so I mean, it's gonna cut, I can cut that some slack. But some of the past movies with like the multiverse, like Doctor Strange, like it was good, but it did seem like it was holding back. And I think the Flash did an okay job with the whole multiverse thing until they started bringing in like, Christopher Reeve and Nicolas Cage, and they were just like really badly done CGI characters.
Yeah.
But like, when they brought back Michael Keaton, they gave him his third movie arc so he can say, okay, I played this character again. And I think, that's the thing nowadays. You just can't watch one movie and watch movie. You got to watch the movie, but also know how that one stacks up with the other one and who was in that one and who, and it's just it kind of takes I'm a nerd, but like even I get exhausted doing the mental math to see how it all feeds into the next one.
Well, yeah, because that's one that, like, when I saw the Marvels, I hadn't seen either WandaVision or Ms. Marvel, the TV shows yet. I had seen the original Captain Marvel movie, but I hadn't seen those TV shows. And I wish they had done a better job advertising that element, that you didn't need to see those for it to be enjoyable, right? That you would still get it. There was enough backstory that you could get it, but I think Marvel has this reputation, or the Marvel Studios has this reputation now that everything is so interconnected that it's like if you missed something along the way, somehow it's not included. I remember TV's Frank made a joke about the Marvels, people not liking the Marvels, where he said something along the lines of like, people hadn't seen all of McHale's Navy when they saw McHale's Navy goes to the Air Force. And I think I made a joke back to him. I was like, well, that's because that one had Gavin McLeod. So that's you can't yeah, the Marvels obviously couldn't do that. But no, but like I think to your point, like one, they've got to sell these better in that sense that like, okay, you don't need to have seen everything. It might help. It might make it a little bit more fun for you, but maybe you'll catch some Easter eggs a little bit better. But otherwise, you don't really need to have watched it all. But two, yeah, like these one-offs, I think it's like this idea, like for example, the Daredevil, the movie, right, the '03 movie. That if and again, because it was 20th Century Fox, so I'm assuming that means that Marvel owns the rights to it now, right? Because they own all of the 20th Century catalog. I wonder like if there's this fear of like, well, we can't put this in with the rest of the Marvel movies, or if they make it like sort of like this non-canon section. But I feel like all those movies should be there. I feel like the Albert Pyun Captain America should be there, and the Dolph Lundgren Punisher, if they can get the rights to that. Like I think they all should be available on Disney Plus. And the same way that like you talked about with comic books, it's like, Daredevil '03 can just be a kind of a one-off that some other artist came in and drew and made a story that's completely different from the one that we, the TV show, and that's completely fine. And it doesn't they don't all have to fit together.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think a lot of it is like the fans, the online community is coming to expect this now.
Yeah.
And and I think that does take away some of the fun, but I think too it's how Marvel feeds into it. It's like how many plates can we keep spinning,
Yeah.
and still keep it afloat. And I think with and the Marvels was a good movie. I enjoyed it, and it almost felt more like a one-off of like those old 2000 movies, because it had a goofy tone that was close to the Fantastic Four movies from Fox of the time. So but like and honestly, you really didn't need to know Miss Marvel's backstory. They kind of just gave you the broad strokes, and she lives with her family, and that they're quirky eccentrics, uh, and then I think really it's just I think it's that fan expectation. I think the fans have to like take a deep breath and say, okay, not everything is going to, not all the dots have to connect. Let's just look at these movies one at a time. And I mean, I remember when, everything had to be a trilogy, like
Yes.
the Dark Knight and, Spider-Man, like it's got to be a trilogy. And now it's like, well, now it just has to be an ongoing thing. And I think the blooms coming off the rose a little bit, and I think they have to, and they're already, to their credit, I think they're already doing. They have to kind of, Marvel has to take a step back and kind of, they don't have to do what DC did, which is completely dismantle everything and start from scratch. But I think they have to tinker with their formula a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, like with the writer strike, right? They took a step back, the writers and actor strikes. They took a step back and kind of looked at what was going on. I think, unfortunately, for whatever reason, there was, I should say whatever reason, I think there's some kind of clear reason. There was a lot of Schadenfreude around the Marvels not doing well. But I think, there's some like you said, there's a lot of positives in the Marvels that, had it been sold better. Because I think the only reason why I went and saw it was I talked with you, I think when you were on the last time, and you talked about watching it and saying it was good. And I was like, okay, because I had concerns. I was like, I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks way too complicated for me to sit through and understand what's going on. And you're like, no, it's a fun space romp. And I was like, okay, and that's what it is, right? It's just a fun space romp, and they do a lot of like really fun things in it. And like you said, there's like sort of the trouble with tribbles element to it, and the Bollywood dancing and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think Marvel, I think part of it is that Marvel, for so long, or Disney, once Disney took over for Marvel, it's really been like, how much can we pump out? How many billion-dollar ones can we do? And then also these TV shows, can we just like make these TV shows so vital that everybody subscribes to Disney Plus and watches them? And I think what's happened is that they might be getting the Disney Plus subscribers, but people aren't always watching them.
Well, another thing is too, I mean, first of all, I think the Marvels does double the business if it was called Captain Marvel 2. That's just me, because right then and there you're saying, okay, now you have to know all these other Marvels. Just call it Captain America or Captain Marvel 2.
Yeah.
But that's Monday morning quarterbacking. But like, really, I think the Marvels kind of got that. Yes, it is. These stories are interconnected, but it was it had a beginning, middle, and end. It was you're just a very you could have plucked that one out and just watched it and enjoyed it for what it was, and not even, if you pulled anybody off the street like your grandma, and said, who didn't know anything about Miss Marvel or WandaVision, they would have said, oh, they would have enjoyed it because I think all the other characters' backstories were pretty well fleshed out.
Yeah, that's a really great point because that one I think is a really great point. The idea that like if it was just Captain Marvel 2, even like Captain Marvel 2 colon the Marvels, right? That could have been a really great way to do that. And like you said, you would have just felt like, okay, as long as I watched Captain Marvel, I'm good to go here with this. And I mean, like you said, all the other ones actually do that, right? Like Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, right? Thor. I mean, yes, Thor uses different titles, but essentially it's four Thor movies, right? And so, yeah, they could have done something similar there, and I think it would have been less confusing. The other piece, I think, to your point, is like with fans expecting something to be part of a bigger thing, right? There's no Avengers movie on the horizon, and I think that's part of the reason why that first Captain Marvel movie did so well was that it was in between. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And it kind of came, I think it was like the movie that was released before Avengers Endgame. And so fans were really expecting it. And I think that's one of the interesting things I think for people our age and either a little older or a little younger versus like kind of like the late millennial, early Gen Z crowd where they grew up with the Iron Man version of comic book movies. And they grew up with this idea that no, comic book movies build to some big team up movie every time. And if they don't, what am I doing here? Whereas for us, we don't need that big Avengers movie because we're not used, for us, this is a new thing for us. And we're perfectly fine with a Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance movie that isn't clearly part of any kind of canon at all.
I remember when it was a big deal when Trial of the Incredible Hulk came out and
Yes.
Daredevil was the Incredible Hulk's lawyer. I was like, oh my God, they have two, like, it's not even like the Spider-Man live action or the any of the live action. There was no crossover characters. It was always kind of like generic ninjas or
Right.
evil truckers or something. It wasn't, you know what I mean? So to actually have somebody from that universe, and then they did the Thor, the one with Thor, and like I was like, you had to live through those lean years, like the Howard the Duck years
Right.
of the 80s, when DC had a stranglehold over Marvel, and which is, for a Gen Z person to be like, they wouldn't be able to fathom that. But
Right.
there was, they had Superman and Batman, and like if you wanted Marvel, you had to go practically, you know, TV or the video store with like Punisher.
Yeah, because I think like my nephew's Gen Z. He's kind of like on the younger end of Gen Z, but he's into DC. I think because DC's like the alternative one, right? Like DC's kind of like when we were collecting, it's like kind of Image or like Valiant or something like that. But that's how he sees Images or DC is like the alternative one, whereas Marvel's the king. And like you said, yeah, I mean, you think about that arc for DC where it's like Superman 1 and 2 are really great. Superman 3 comes out, not so hot. I mean, I enjoyed that movie, but it just didn't do as well. And then, of course, they have Quest for Peace. But then, when you think they're done, right? Like they pull out Batman, and it's almost like they just kind of restart. And it's one of the interesting things is if you look at Marvel's history around that time, Marvel's kind of like losing out to these ebbs and flows of what DC's doing, where it's like Superman 1 and 2, everybody loves these movies. Okay, let's see if we can make a Spider-Man movie. And then by the time they get it together, Superman 3 comes out and nobody wants comic book movies anymore. And the project dies or it ends up being a direct to video thing like with Captain America. And it's kind of the same thing. It was like Batman was big in '89. Okay, now Marvel's going to make their own movies. Now people want Spider-Man. Now people want Iron Man. They want all of these movies. And then Batman Forever comes out, and suddenly people don't want comic book movies anymore. And it was interesting how Marvel was chasing it for so long, and then in the late '90s, early 2000s, suddenly they kind of break out with like Spider-Man and those movies.
Well, I think the big takeaway is like you could almost kind of put a line in the sand where DC kind of uh, imploded and Marvel took off. As 97 was Batman and Robin, and then 1998 was Blade. Now,
Right.
the reason why Blade was successful, it didn't have to leave breadcrumbs to the next one. It didn't have to reboot anything. It didn't have to be hardwired into the next 7 projects. It was Blade, and it was awesome, and we loved it. and then we got more Blade, and then that slowly they've realized, hey, there's a market for comic book movies, and I think with a lesser known character, again, there was more freedom to make it more of a Wesley Snipes movie with vampires instead of, oh, this is a Marvel Comics property.
Yeah, that's a really great point because then, after Blade, right? After Blade 2, actually the same year as Blade 2, they come up with Spider-Man with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which is in a way it's almost Marvel's Batman or Superman. But to that point, they hadn't really had it. They hadn't pulled it off, or they hadn't made it work. But you're right, like Blade is a unique one because it's almost like it's not a Marvel movie. I mean, he's a Marvel character, but the way they make it, it doesn't feel like a Marvel movie. And somebody had written an article I was reading, a kind of a clickbaity article, but they were saying how that Blade movie is actually kind of really important because it showed companies, their distribution houses, that you didn't have to have Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, etc. to make a movie. You could use one of the lesser known guys. But when you think about it, really the lesser known one that they really make it work with is Iron Man. That's where they kind of start that, because if you look through most of the rest of them, it's like maybe a sequel, like Elektra's a sequel to Daredevil, but Daredevil was kind of a big one. It's like they never quite went back to that Blade well, like I think they should. I mean, I know they did the TV show, but there was a lot in Blade that I think could have made them successful for sure.
Yeah, and again, I think too it was a New Line movie, and it wasn't really under their umbrella. And it was at a time when I think Marvel was selling off their property just to keep the lights on.
Right.
And
right.
but I think I think if they could learn anything, it would be to go back to the first Blade movie and see how non interconnected standalone premise can work, and then okay, maybe if that one's successful, figure out where it goes on. I think they're putting the cart before the horse, and I think they just have to just concentrate on the movie that's in front of them, not three phantom movies that may get made depending on the box office.
Right, well, because that was the thing with the first Marvel Cinematic Universe, that the Phase 1 that they created. It's almost like, well, in a way, I would say they created a monster. I mean, really, what happens is that Disney buys them as they're as this is unfolding, and realizes like, oh wow, we can print money with these movies. But the problem is you can't. If you oversaturate it too much, and I think that's the issue that they've come into. I think it's a combination of too much of it's interconnected, and then there's also just too much of it out there.
What I think, and I'm no expert, but when the pandemic was going on, all you had time to do was sit and watch TV.
Right. Yeah.
So they had all these shows, all these movies. You could get caught up, and now everybody's got their own life.
Yeah.
And some people can watch 4 television shows that are on alternating months and watch all the movies that are out in the theater, and that's fine. Some of us can't. And I think we have to kind of choose when and where we kind of pick up on these things. And I think I think they're realizing that now. There's like most of that mentality was kind of due to the pandemic, and people had time on their hands to actually watch all this stuff. And now there's so much content, not just with Disney, but with all Netflix and all the streamers and all the theatrical studios. You can't watch it all. And so I think, I think quantity is should go down, and they should start focusing on quality.
Yeah, it's with Disney Marvel movies, right? Quality over quantity in that case, and then for us with our direct to video actors, Dolph Lundgren, quantity over quality in your case, Dolph. Do as many movies as you can, and we'll get into it. But for Marvel, yeah, definitely a time to kind of scale it back a bit.
Yeah, and speaking of Dolph, I haven't seen the new Aquaman, but that's the only one of the DC movies I haven't seen. But I'm sure it'll be on Max here soon, because the first one had Dolph on riding a seahorse. So that, I mean, right then and there, that's top 3 DC movies for me.
Exactly, I agree. Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to see that one in the theater either, so I don't know if it probably still is. It's funny how movies don't last in the theater as much as they used to. It used to be like you had like a movie like an Aquaman would be in the theater for a few months at least, that you could go. It might the number of screens would diminish, but it would still be there to watch. And now it's like, if it's in there for a month, you're surprised.
Well, I remember when Batman came out, when it came out on video, it was still in the theater.
That's right.
And that was that was like mind blowing.
Yeah.
And you don't see that again, anymore. But I actually you kind of do sometimes, because the window, it gets so short now. It seems like the movies are on streaming month and a half later, and I think a lot of that's to like combat piracy. But at the same time, it's like, it's again, you have to pick your battles. It's like, wow, am I going to go, brave the ice and snow to see Aquaman, or am I just going to wait till Valentine's Day or whenever when it's going to be on streaming?
Yeah, well, exactly. And when you're so busy with life, it's like, okay, this weekend I'm going to go see it. No, it doesn't work out this weekend. Okay, next weekend I'll go see it. All right, no, something comes up. I can't see it this weekend. Third weekend, oh, I go. All right, now I've definitely got time to see it. Oh, it's already gone. It's not in the theater anymore. And so that's kind of what happens, I think, a lot of times with these movies. And so yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I think the other thing too with Marvel, with Disney, and then DC with Max, is that they're double dipping, right? Where it's like, they want to sell it in the theaters, but then they also want to sell their streaming service and get people to buy their streaming service to watch it there. And I think that's another piece of it that they have to kind of look at again. It's like, is this double dipping really working for us, or are we sort of cannibalizing our returns?
Yeah, and now everybody's kind of partnering together, and it seems like there's going to be fewer players at the table now, and I can't imagine that being good. I think you're going to have a smaller selection from a smaller group of providers, which it's and it, to them, it's all content. It's not art. I mean, not that we watch many things that would be considered art, but Showdown in Little Tokyo, I think, is up there as one of the great artistic masterpieces of our time. Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's just it's all commerce to them, and what do they care if they offer you 10 movies, 9 of which you really don't want to see, as long as you're watching that one. That they keep the subscription going month to month, and that's where I fall into. Like, just when I think I'm going to cancel Netflix, there's one show or one movie like, oh, they have Equalizer 3. Well, I guess I'll keep it for another month. So I get roped into that just as much as anybody.
Yeah, I'm seeing that with AMC Plus, where we were getting rid of it because we only had it for my wife to watch Mad Men, and we ended up Amazon had a sale where we could buy all the episodes on Prime for her to watch there. So I was like, all right, we'll get rid of Amazon Plus or AMC Plus, but they have VFW on there, and I've been really meaning to see VFW, and it's just like month after month. So it's like VFW can end up costing me like $40 or $50 if I don't watch it soon.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, what we'll do is we'll take a break here, and then we come back. We'll finish up talking on Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. So, yeah, we'll be right back. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle.
All right, we are back, and yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about is sort of the I say like the Nicolas Cage factor in this movie, because I think it's a really it adds a level to this. I know we talked about kind of this the different stars in this and adding to the quality of it, but Nicolas Cage in general, I mean, he is just almost he's unleashed, it seems like, in here. He just kind of really gives it in his performance.
Yeah, it's one of those things where anybody else as Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider, I think if you were looking at the comics for like a real true interpretation of the character, Nicolas Cage isn't really somebody that you would think of. But it's kind of inspired casting for the first movie and the second movie, because he always has a willingness to go there. And if you're gonna play a character whose head's on fire, I mean, you got to get Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, and it's like the way he just I mean like there's that scene where there's a scene in the movie where he is, he's the Ghost Rider, and these guys like they use like this like grenade launcher and just kind of knock him out completely. And he wakes up in a hospital in Romania, and he's just like it is like, his Johnny or whatever in the hospital, and he's just like, like, I need like all the morphine and all the whatever you've got or whatever. And he's just like going through the cabinets and trying to grab whatever he can. And I just don't know who else would do that scene the way he did that scene.
Yeah, and I mean, there. I think my favorite scene is when they're shaking down kind of like one of the low level
Yes.
gangster guys at the club, and he's trying to keep the Ghost Rider at bay, but it keeps like, his face keeps flaming up, and then he most people would say he's creeping at the door. But the way Nicolas Cage says it is like, he's creeping at the door. It's like, I don't even like it's just one of those, A+ Cage moments of line delivery, acting, just one of those, just it's quintessential Cage.
Yeah, and it's interesting, looking at this time when this movie comes out, he was starting to do films that they weren't exactly direct to video, right? But they weren't like, movies like Seeking Justice. They were limited release, maybe making like 10 to 15 million a year, and that he was kind of doing a lot of movies like that. And Ghost Rider was in that category, but I think there was still a sense that he could, you know, maybe recover and get back to those big budget feature films. And that's really not where he goes, right? He goes into this world that we've kind of been inhabiting with him, where it's, at the very least they're indie flicks, but a lot of times they're kind of direct to streaming, direct to video, that kind of thing. And I do kind of wonder with Ghost Rider that if Disney ever wanted to do another Ghost Rider movie the way that they did this one, if they would ever bring Cage back, and that if he would be amenable to it, looking at kind of where his career is at this point, where he's not doing a lot of big budget films.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see him as like the mentor, because I know in Spirit of Vengeance, the little boy Danny, I think he's supposed to be Danny Ketch, who's the second Ghost Rider. They never come out and say it, but I think that was maybe the intention. So I think it would be interesting to see like him maybe passing the torch, kind of like the way Sam Elliott did in the first movie. I think I think he's such a comic book nerd that at heart, I think it would be hard for him to say no. It's
Yeah,
hard for him to say no to any movie.
At this point. I know. I don't want to say how many movies he had in 2023. I look at his IMDb and it looks like 5 or 6. I mean, this is like, we're talking about quantity over quality. He's definitely just going for it. Like he just, and like you said, the Johnny Blaze name. I mean, that's kind of the synonymous one with Ghost Rider. Like, I mean, Method Man, right? He call the way Ghostface Killer was Tony Stark or Iron Man. Method Man was Johnny Blaze, right? He was the Ghost Rider of that group. Um, and so that's kind of the name. But like you said, yeah, Danny Ketchum's kind of the second one. I'm trying to remember when I was collecting, because the first Ghost Rider that I remember, he was in a Daredevil comic. So he was like guesting in a Daredevil. It was like showed like Daredevil riding on the motorcycle with him. And I was like, oh, this looks really cool. And I can't remember at that time if he was Danny Ketchum or if it was Johnny Blaze still at that point. And then I think the third one is Robbie Reyes that was in uh, the Shield, Agents of Shield TV show that they just brought in for an episode or two and then didn't come back with them. So I feel like something's got to be done with Ghost Rider, but you feel like you talked about with these actors getting like a third movie to kind of finish off the trilogy. One more with Nicolas Cage, where like you said, he's handing he's passing the torch off, could really be a good one.
I mean, and his head is a torch, so
Yes.
I mean, it would be very easy for him to pass it, along. But
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel like, it's interesting because, Nicolas Cage, right? He thought he was going to be up for Superman. It didn't end up happening. Thought he was going to do Iron Man. And that didn't end up happening for him either. And for someone who is such a big comic book nut, because he was like, I think he said that like he feels like comic books are like folklore for past generations, that comic books are our version of folklore, which is kind of a cool idea. But so he's a huge comic book person. So the fact, I feel like he's like this untapped resource that these movies haven't been, that whether it's Marvel, I guess that because I know that the rights have reverted back to Marvel and Disney. Like, yeah, they could do for some Cage in some of their movies.
yeah, and I think he is like a fine wine. He does get better with age, because I mean, like, he was phenomenal in Pig. That's probably
Yes.
his career defining performance. I think 20 years from now, when that's the one that's going to be on TCM. I think not Spirit of Vengeance, but like I think you know and I even think he has a Ghost Rider tattoo. Uh,
Mm.
and I think I remember seeing the special features of the first one back in the day. He wanted them to like incorporate that to the movie somehow, and they were just like, no. But like, for someone who does have a passion for comic books, I think and of course he was Spider-Man Noir and across or Into the Spider-Verse.
That's right, he did the voice.
Yeah. So I think, when you get a guy like Cage, or someone that already has that passion for the character, it can only better the movie, because they're already going to be thinking two steps ahead. Kind of like with Wolverine, not so much for his passion for the comics, but the passion for the character itself. You've already had someone that's going to be maybe questioning what's on the paper and if it's true to the character, or they can only better what's there, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too with Cage, when you look at his biography, when you look at movies like National Treasure, and some of those kinds of movies where there's like an absurdity in there. And I think I even saw him doing an interview about, I think it was National Treasure, where he's like, I really had to sell that scene where I'm talking to my buddy and I'm saying like, we're gonna steal the Declaration of Independence, and it's like, it's so ridiculous, right? That we're talking about doing this, but I've got to sell it. I've got to make it work. And I think that for comic book movies, it's kind of a funny thing that we sort of take for granted that they don't have to sell it anymore. That like, I mean, just think about the Thor movie where Natalie Portman sort of just takes it for granted that Thor is Thor, right? That he's telling the truth when he's Thor, that he's not like a smooth talking Aussie scam artist who's going to get her inheritance from her grandparents out of her, and move on to the next town. She takes for granted that he's Thor and believes it, and that's kind of an element of these movies that I think we've almost kind of lost. That, like, and I think it's, again, with younger people watching these movies, they take for granted that superhero movies are a big deal, and there isn't a level of like absurdity or of needing to suspend belief. They take it for granted that you believe this stuff, that they almost wish it was more real in a way. Whereas for us, there's like this fantastic element of it that makes it so much more fun. I was thinking about like the old Hulk show, where it's like you just loved at the end when he would fight somebody and turn into Lou Ferrigno and all of that stuff. And I feel like Nicolas Cage gives that element.
Well, I mean, a perfect example is the scene in the car with Nadia, and she explains her backstory and why she had Danny and her deal with the devil, and he just sums it up by saying, "So you're the devil's baby mama," and he has like this Elvis kind of swagger when he says it, and it's like it just perfectly sums it. Like we didn't even need the flashback to why all that happened. You just need him saying that, and you buy it because one, it's Cage, and two, it's the truth, but it's also filtered through his kind of screen presence, and it's a win-win.
Right, because it's ridiculous, right? The idea that like she was impregnated by the devil, right? That's such an absurd idea that we need to believe, and he sells it in this way. Like they're in this car and they're kind of having this perfectly serious conversation about how he sold his soul to the devil. She, had the devil's baby, and it's this real serious conversation where all those things are happening. And then he just kind of brings it back to us, right? About like what's going on here, what the conversation really was about when he says, "Oh, so you're the devil's baby mama." It's like, and like you said, dude, that little aplomb where I think he did more of that Elvis thing for the first movie than the second one, but there were elements of it there.
Yeah, and it's almost kind of like interjecting his own kind of MST commentary on it. Like, I know this is ridiculous. You know this is ridiculous, but that's our job. Like,
Yeah, and I think comic book movies could use a little bit of that again. It's a really interesting thing, as we're talking about this, that like, the movies that the way that we, I think for so long as kids, and I always think about this, that like, when like you said, when we watch, the Incredible Hulk TV movies and there's Thor or there's Daredevil, and we're just so excited that these people are even in these movies, and I guess they were trying to do a crossover between Spider-Man and Hulk because those shows were at the same time, and I guess there was something to do with rights issues again. I think Universal had Hulk, and then somebody else had Spider-Man. It was something like that prevented that from happening. But we were just like, we wanted this for so long that when we finally got it with the Avengers movie, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was almost like you can't like, you can't complain when it gets out of control because we wanted it for so long. But there is a sense of like, yeah, if like for example, if you do a third Ghost Rider movie and it's introduces Danny Ketchum, but that also has like Blade in it, or one of the other Dark Knight kind of characters, it would be a really cool idea to kind of mix him in with other characters. But again, it wouldn't impact the Blade series at all, right? It's almost like you're just selling Blade in the Ghost Rider movie, but you're not. It doesn't affect the Blade movies at all, or whatever. We could use some of that again, I think.
yeah, and I think one, I mean, it goes back to just serving the movie at hand. And, yeah, it would be nice to have, all these characters pop up. And I think they're doing a Thunderbolts, which is going to be
Yeah.
kind of like a alternate, like B Squad, kind of edgier Avengers, uh, using guys that, kind of don't play by the rules kind of thing. And, Ghost Rider would fit, in like that criteria. And I think, there is an element there that the Ghost Rider is best as a loner, always riding the road, and I I I I think he would work, but like I said, it almost to me he kind of lends himself to almost like a serial, like the Incredible Hulk TV show, like getting into adventures, helping kids, and single moms or whatever, and then at the end, yeah, it turns into the Ghost Rider. I think really they could really do a good kind of keeping him in like the Daredevil Punisher television universe. I think he would fare well.
Yeah, and I think the key thing, I think, if they do that, is it can't be like those Netflix series where they're like 13-hour movies, because each episode is sort of serialized. Like if they do it more like the one-offs on the old Hulk show, where it was like, yes, there's sort of this continuing saga of him trying to find a cure for being the Hulk, or trying to find his way out of it. But each episode was a self-contained plot that was, would have a beginning, a middle, and a resolution at the end. And that's something I think is important too. Is I think these mini series, but especially the Netflix ones where that's like 13 hours long. I think you could do like a 13 episode series, a television show of Ghost Rider that isn't, so almost like maybe I don't know, like almost like Hulk meets Renegade or something like that. But that kind of idea, I think you could really run with. I think if you made it episodic at least.
Yeah, and that just goes with the whole television landscape. Now everything has to be this huge 13 episode long movie, like you said. And we need to get back to like the the good old days, the Magnum PI days,
Yeah.
where he had one case an episode, and that was it. There might be
Yes.
a two-parter at the end. There might be a crossover with Murder She Wrote, on the horizon. But let's just have one character do it, one plot, one episode. It just there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was, and I think part of the reason, like think about some shows like The Sopranos or Mad Men, where they, yes, they kind of had a story arc that would go across the entire season. But a lot of the episodes, especially Sopranos, I think more than Mad Men, where the episodes themselves tended to have some kind of resolution at the end, unless it was like a to be continued for the finale. And I think that is the problem with some of these shows on streaming, is there's this idea of like, well, all the episodes are available now, so you can just binge it and watch it all at once, which I get that part of it, but a 13-hour episode or 13-hour movie is a lot. Because you think of like serialized movies, like the old serials where comic books were first, in the theater, they were like 13 minutes, at the beginning of that. It's so if it was like, yes, if it was 13 episodes, 13-minute episodes that led to one whole story, then that would be fine. But when they're over an hour at a time, it can be really, really draining.
And that's why I like, this day and age, I kind of gravitate more to like comedies and stuff, because
Yeah.
the comedies the sitcoms are still the only kind of pure, uh, you know, 22 minutes, ABC, boom, it's all done. You don't need to know what's going to happen. I mean, it helps to know the characters' background and stuff and how they interact. But you could just put on like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and laugh your head off, and you don't need to know how all the characters got, who they're crossing over this week. And
Right.
it and if it is a reoccurring character, it's great that if but you don't have to know who they are, so it's one of those things where I think prestige television, which is, I mean, I like that term as much as like elevated horror.
Right.
I think that kind of ruined, not ruined, it just changed television enough to the point where uh, I'd just rather watch a 90-minute movie and be done with it. It's one of those things. And so many of the shows now, they're 10 episodes, all the plots in the first episode, the resolutions in the second episode, and then the other episodes, they're just chasing their tails.
Yeah, that's a really great point because, I mean, obviously, probably the biggest culprit of this was HBO. When we think of like the early days of HBO, right, where it was like they were still kind of finding themselves and they were doing, like Real Sex and Dream On and some of those shows, and then they start really hitting the ground running with, with Oz, with Sopranos, with The Wire, and it was kind of like one of those things where like everybody's got to make shows like that. And then, when Mad Men comes out, kind of as Soprano ends, Mad Men starts. Kind of, I think they were kind of roughly like a year or two apart. It's almost like this thing of like, oh, well, and what was the other, Breaking Bad? It was like this idea that like everybody's going to have their own, like you said, prestige show. And there was this sense of like, you could make a movie, you could make a TV show, anything, but you could like turn it into a big tent thing by creating buzz and being like, oh, you're the person not watching the show. Oh, well, all these famous celebrities are watching the show on Twitter and they're telling you you should watch it, that kind of thing. And like you said, it was, like not only, with those prestige shows are they kind of there and, you can kind of take them or leave them, but we have so many options now. So whether it's like you said, 90-minute movies on Tubi, or like just bringing up Always Sunny. I think Always Sunny is on Hulu, right, where you can just watch any episode at any time. Family Guy's another one thing that's all on Hulu, where you can just watch any episode at any time. So there's another piece of it there where it's like, do I want to get into this show like Billions or Succession or something, or do I want to just throw on a random episode of one of those shows that I really like that I haven't seen that episode in a while. I'm just going to throw that episode on and kill 30 minutes and have fun with it. It's kind of, yeah, for I think for a lot of us, it's that second option that we prefer.
Yeah, and like I said, there are people that have more. I'll put it diplomatically. They have more time on their hands than we do.
Right.
You know, uh, but like where they can, knock these shows back and in record time, and then keep up with all the movies and everything. But it's like as I'm finding out, like as I'm getting up there in age, I'm like, I'm gonna do my own thing. I can't, if I had a dollar for every time somebody asks me if I've seen this new show, I'm like, just put it on the pile next to all the ones I haven't seen.
Right, exactly.
So it's one of those things where I'm just gonna do me, and I'm gonna watch what I'm gonna watch, and if it's probably not going to be internet buzz or anything that makes me want to see it, other than who's in it and what it's about. And honestly, that's what more do you want from them? Like I'm we're the kind of guys that'll watch anything just because Steven Seagal's in it.
Yeah.
So if a new Seagal comes out, that's higher up on the pile than some 13-minute prestige drama that the entire office is buzzing about. So.
Right, exactly. Because we've got that kind of completist mindset of like, oh, there's a new Seagal we haven't had in a while. We got to do that new Seagal or the new Dolph, right? I remember I was talking to Ty from Comments about Command Performance, right? Remember we saw that trailer for it where he's drumming, and it's like, oh, when are we gonna catch this? Just like you kind of put it in your Netflix queue in the save queue and wait for it to be available and watch it. Yeah, we don't really have that kind of element anymore either.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too. It was like I kind of like that about Netflix. You could just when they were doing the disc service, you pull it up and you can see all the movies, and it's just like there. And then like maybe I'm old school. I like to read, so it would just be all the number or all the words on the screen. And now it seems like when I look at Netflix on the television, the thumbnails that they use don't really sell the movie itself. It'll be the most random person or screen grab or shoddy Photoshop job of who knows what. I couldn't even tell you what the movie's about. Then I have to click on it, but I don't want to click on it. If you just tell, and sometimes you can't even read the font that the movie title's in. So I'm like, you know what? I'll go watch Equalizer 3. I know what that's about.
Right. That's a great point with Netflix, because it's like, yeah, if you hover over, if you just hover over the thumbnail, suddenly it'll start playing like a preview or start playing the movie or something. And I guess they must have looked into it, done studies that, oh, if we just start playing the movie, people will just go with it and watch it, which seems crazy to me, but I guess that's what people do. But you're right, it's so different from it'd be nice if they just had like a text list view, right, where you could just click on that function and just have a list of movies and be able to pick the one you want.
Yeah, I mean it's one of and it's funny too with the auto starting of the movies now. I think that's where Netflix kind of fudges some of their data.
Yes.
And like if you fall asleep in front of the TV and it starts auto playing something, it's, oh well, we've got this movie had billions of minutes logged, and it's like, well, it's probably because Grandpa fell asleep in front of the TV. But okay.
Well, that's the same way that Major League Baseball gets a lot of their ratings, is that because it's like it's the league is skewing older, so it's like guys in their 60s who fall asleep, or 70s or 80s, fall asleep watching the game, and they watch the whole thing. Whereas like the younger demographics, they don't do anything. But I think the other thing too with Netflix is they don't have ads, right? So it's like if you binge something on Prime, or I don't, not Prime, because Prime doesn't have I guess they're adding ads now, but for like YouTube and things like that, if you binge something or if you watch for a long time, they stop it and say, hey, are you still watching this? Because the people who do the ads, they want to make sure people are watching the ads. Netflix doesn't have to worry about that. It's kind of almost the opposite, right? Where for them, they can jack up their streaming numbers if you fall asleep while they're watching it.
Yeah, I mean that that's like back in the day when you would fall asleep on, regular television. It would just keep going. It like, and it always kind of irritated me. It's like, especially when you are watching something, that's the worst. It's
Right,
like,
yes.
are you still watching? Well, yeah, I'm watching. Like,
Right, exactly.
Now I gotta find the remote to click yes, and then it
Right.
turns. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe I'm
it's
just getting older.
no, I agree.
Like,
It's the same. It's a pain because it's like you get settled in for a while. Like one of the things, like my wife, around Christmas time, she has like a whole YouTube playlist of Christmas music, and it's one of those things where we'll be doing something else or whatever while the Christmas music's on, and it's like, oh, where's the remote? Where can how do we say that yes, we're still watching it, or skip this ad or something like that? And it's like, yeah, you have to be much more present. Whereas like, yeah, when you just run on cable or whatever, it can just go. And maybe in the past, right now, of course, TV's on 24 hours a day, but in the past, you would you'd wake up to the national anthem playing and realize like, oh man, they're going off the air here soon.
Well, the worst is like on YouTube. Have you gotten the ad where it's like an hour-long infomercial?
Hmm.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
I I was just, I fell asleep and I was like, what am I watching? Like it was like some cooking show, and it was like, would are you, and I was like, I'm not watching this. Like, and then it still said like, skip ad. I'm like, well, this is an ad. This looks like it was.
Right. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm like, oh God. Some days I just miss regular broadcast TV.
I know. I agree with you there for sure. Because yeah, you're right. Those big ads, it's like, and they're creepy. There's like the kind of a creepy tone to them. I mean, there's like a sort of a creepy paid programming vibe to them. That especially if it's late at night, it can be just really, really. Especially if it's like starts to enter into your dreams or something like that, or if you wake up in the middle and you see that. Yeah, like you said, it's sometimes. I mean, of course, with broadcast programming, they also have a paid programming where it's like if I fall asleep watching a game, they do paid programming. It's like some of those paid programming things are a little bit creepy too, so you never know.
Well, then the like I get that, like the slap chop and the,
Yes, yeah,
all the uh the pocket fisherman, all that, like, all the classics, but now it's just like, and God, they try to make it look like a TikTok video or something, that they'll have the bars on the side of the screen going like vertical, and I'm like, why? And it's just like the words, the girl's pointing to the words. I'm like, don't like I said, now I'm like old man yelling at cloud, but
right. Well, it does because it does make you kind of because I think it's like what they're doing, right? They're trying to do it on the cheap, so they're just having people use their iPhones and like do like selfie cam, and then they, because it's only in that vertical space, they just post it up there. So it's like, yeah, everything is done on the cheap now to such a degree that like, what was it? Mad About You, right? Where Paul Reiser's character, he did like, he directed like training videos and things like that. I think that was like his job. And like he would direct like like an in-flight video or something like that. It's like almost like now like there's no space for that anymore. It's just, get on your phone and just make the video yourself.
yeah, and it's like, there used to be those commercials too where they made it look like a news broadcast, and they're
Right,
telling you about
yes.
this new miracle product, and then it's like, it's like the same thing. And now, like, I've even seen them where they put like advertisement at the bottom, but like it's like they're trying to lull you into thinking that you suddenly got on TikTok and you're watching some influencer telling you about crap you don't need, and it's just
Well, because that's
starting to
part
get
of it.
into like a Dennis Miller rant. Like,
Right, exactly. Well, because that's part of it
we were
with the
talking about
TV.
Nicolas Cage at some point.
Right, exactly. No, we got on this brand here. Yeah, exactly. Well, kind of going back to Cage on this, because I think, it is interesting watching this movie, in 2011. And again, it is a movie that like, I mean, we've talked about some of the other kind of more forgotten comic book movies on here because we did a Return of the Swamp Thing, the Wynorski film, which was a lot of fun. And I think the first time you were on when I came back from hiatus, I think we talked about DTV comic book movies like Captain America and Punisher and stuff like that. And it is interesting because this movie it's almost like you feel like almost like they would never make this movie again, and which is kind of a shame because I think there's a space in the comic book movie ecosystem for this movie. And I almost think too, if the idea is that like the younger millennials and the Gen Z kids who grew up on the Avengers version, the Marvel Cinematic Universe version, and they need everything to be canon and they need everything to build up to a big movie, if we could just give them more of this, I think they would warm up to it. I think they would understand, they would appreciate it more.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree. I mean, just like a $40 million down and dirty comic book movie. And I mean, it's one of those, like I said, it feels almost like, not trying to use a pun with spirit here, but it feels kindred spirits to those old TV movies and direct-to-video movies from the 80s and 90s, and it feels like a version that could have existed at that time if the effects were there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think this is one for people. I think, it was on free streamers. It was kind of removed, but I think this is one people, if you haven't checked it out before, I think if you haven't seen it in a long time, I think it's the other piece. I think people have kind of written this one off, I think, kind of, because it comes out in 2011, 2012 at the time that Marvel is really starting to cook. And I think that's the other piece of it is that this almost gets, people watched it, and I don't think they gave it kind of I don't know, the not the respect, but I think they didn't quite appreciate it the way that people might appreciate it now. And so I think it's one people should definitely come back to.
Yeah, and you got to think too, because the landscape has changed so much in the 12 years that it was made. Uh, now we have streaming, now we have so many other things kind of vying for your attention, that a movie like this actually gets made now. It's probably going to streaming because it's just one of those things that would slip through the cracks. But when it was released, I think it was still big enough for everybody to kind of take to. But like you said, like everybody started at that time starting to expect something from the Marvel brand, and it kind of delivered something that maybe that you know they were hoping for an Avengers kind of deal, where this is kind of like the nitty gritty kind of alternative to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a space for this kind of movie. And I think for people out there, I mean, kind of going back to some of the things you talked about earlier too, I think even like the old Daredevil, which also it doesn't look like it's on streaming right now, but I think that '03 Daredevil, I think there's a place for those movies. And I think people, especially younger people, and according to the episode analytics, we do have some people that are younger that listen. And I think if you haven't explored these older comic book movies, and it's even weird just to call them older, right? Because it's like I think that like Daredevil came out in '03, that it's over 20 years old now. Because at the time it was a new comic book movie. But I think these are ones that people should check out again. And I think Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance in particular, just because it is Nicolas Cage giving this really fantastic performance, and then, like you said, kind of the down and dirty elements of it, the short runtime. I mean, it's only 96 minutes long. A lot of those elements to it. And Idris Elba is great in it as well. It's just a really good kind of fun, like you said, down and dirty take on Ghost Rider.
And there are even moments too that kind of flirt with like an R rating kind of, kind of element. And there were some scenes too, it felt like kind of the editing was a little abrupt. Like there might have been even like a 2-hour version of this somewhere, but they just kept cutting it down to like its barest essentials, and which I always appreciate. And I think there was, you know, they, I don't think they did one, but it would be interesting if there was kind of a director's cut to see if there's anything kind of maybe even darker than what we got.
Yeah, and maybe a good place to wrap up here is I just happened to see on the IMDb page for this for Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance back in December there was an article, an interview that Cage did where he said he'd be up for revisiting Ghost Rider and playing the part again. So I think if he's saying he's up for it, I think again from Marvel's standpoint, I mean this movie cost $50 million. I think you could for 50 million now, right? Because it's 13 years later. I don't know if 50 million now would get you over the hump on this, but I think you could do it on the cheap and either make it direct to streaming, like you were saying, or like a limited theatrical release and see how it does. And I think people would enjoy it, and if it means that they're introducing him to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's fine if that's what they feel like they have to do, or if it's just, again, having it be a one-off. I think from Marvel's standpoint, I think, or from DC, Disney and Marvel, they should look at more of these one-offs because I think there is some value in those.
Well, I think with the whole multiverse angle that they've kind of started, I think that you can't put the genie back in the bottle now. So I think
Yes.
I think anything's on the table, everything's up for grabs, and I think even having that interview, I think he might be purposefully testing the waters.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of putting it out there, like, "Hey, if you're thinking about it, then I'm definitely available and willing." So, always really cool to hear there. So, yeah, I mean, I guess as we're wrapping up, Mitch, anything else about this movie that we haven't covered?
I mean, the only thing, like in the, I guess in the negative column that I could say is like, as a fan of Crank 1 and 2, the action was a little kind of watered down from Neville Dean Taylor. I think if any, character really could have benefited from their kind of like frenetic energy, it would be Ghost Rider. But I think maybe they felt maybe beholden to the character or to the budget, probably. It wasn't quite the action flick I was kind of hoping for from them. But I mean that's the only thing I can say negative wise, that we hadn't discussed. I mean the movie is flawed. It's not. I mean it's but it's stuff like that. Like I always say, is it a rainy Sunday afternoon movie? Yes. If this is on, I'm not turning it off on a rainy Sunday afternoon. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to your point, about the movie, the rating, I think I think Neville Dean Taylor, I think they had an R-rated version of this that they wanted to do, and I guess Sony, it was Sony that had the rights to it. They got cold feet and decided to push for a more PG-13 version of it. So I think they had a version of it that might have been a little bit better. Maybe we need to start a Twitter campaign to get the Neville Dean Taylor. I guess there probably isn't a Neville Dean Taylor cut. I think it's just that they had a script that Sony passed on, and they had to create a nicer version of it. But I think they were thinking kind of like what you were saying, that they wanted something more in the Crank vein.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, for all its flaws, I mean, it's the only movie I can think of in which a little boy pukes fire on the Nicolas Cage's face.
Yes.
So because of that, it's recommended.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Where else are you going to go to get that? So.
Exactly. I mean, it's up there in one of my favorite comic book movies, and I think people sometimes think I'm saying it more to be like ironic or like I'm kind of being facetious and not picking one of the more standard ones. But some of the big ones like Superman, I definitely have up there as some of my favorites. But this is there just because I love Ghost Rider as a character, and I really love what they did here on this sort of slim down, dirtier, grittier 95-minute version here. And Nicolas Cage's performance was just so much fun. That what you want Nicolas Cage to be in this movie, he delivers it.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan of the character and the actor, I mean, it gives you what you want and just enough of what you want to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So as we're wrapping up here, Mitch, things that you wanted to plug.
Well, there's always the Video Vacuum website. You can always go there at videovacuum.blogspot.com. Follow me on Twitter, the Video Vacuum. Check out my books on Amazon. I have a new one coming out soon, hopefully February. It's going to be the Kung Fu Companion, the Saki movie guide. It's going to be similar in format to my previous books on horror and action. Just going to be like 200 and some pages of nothing but Kung Fu reviews from the 60s to today, to chapters on Van Damme and Jackie Chan and lots of Shaw Brothers stuff. So keep your eye out for that.
That sounds awesome. Now, yeah, for people listening, if it's out when we're releasing this episode, I will I'll have the link will be in the podcast description. So if that's the case, and then if it's not, I can kind of put some other links, and of course, if you look up Mitch Level in on Amazon, you can kind of find all of your books there. So it's Level is Lovell, and so at the very least, I'll have that mentioned in the podcast description, but. Yeah, this book's out by then. Definitely, people should pick it up because I think, the like you said, the martial arts movie, it is kind of fascinating where it took that turn. Like I think kind of growing up, kind of in a similar way where someone would go to the video store and get like those Shaw Brothers movies, and you'd be like, oh, I want to watch Chinese Connection or something like that. But then like also the Van Damme movies and the Seagal movies, how those were kind of also big at the same time. It was a really fascinating time, in that to be a movie watcher when it came to martial arts films.
Well, yeah, I try to cherry pick different eras, different actors, different directors, different genres within the genre. There's the traditional costume kung fu movies, but there's also ninja movies. There's the DTV actioners that we know and loved, but there's also like the Bruce exploitation with the Bruce Lee, Bruce Lowe. So I tried to give a good combination of classic films that should be on the top of everybody's must-watch list, and some of the grungier, cheaper, more WTF kind of entries. There are like plenty of Godfrey Ho
Nice.
entries in there as well.
Nice. That's always exciting. I mean, one of the things I love about your books is that for people listening, you can read them cover to cover, but you can also sort of have them there as a resource. And I think, especially with these martial arts movies, where more and more of them are being available, whether it's like Vinegar Syndrome, releasing them, or streaming service like Tubi. Tubi has a whole bunch of Godfrey Ho films, and then I think they also have a lot of Shaw Brothers stuff that they've added, or maybe it's like Shaw Brothers adjacent, so maybe like a tier below them. But what's great about your books is people get those. You can sort of, as you're going through Tubi and you're looking for a movie to watch, you can kind of look one of those up in there and be like, oh yeah, this is definitely something I want to check out, or maybe I'll pass it. I'll kind of keep scrolling through Tubi.
Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, the way I look at it, it's kind of like when I'm trying to think about what to put into a book, it's like kind of like having a well-stocked refrigerator. You want a good mix of soda, beer, water, juice, milk. You want all the mainstays, but then you also want to stock up the freezer with not only vegetables, like stuff that's good for you, like the classics, but also like the junk food, like which is like the Godfrey Ho stuff. So I try to have a balanced diet of a little bit of everything. And if you get curious about one or two movies and you watch that, great. Maybe that sends you down the rabbit hole of just kind of weird, nonsensical, crazy, and maybe even some of the good movies, like you'll even gravitate to. And it's tough. I don't know about for you when you review stuff. It's always tough for me to review a classic.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you don't need me to tell you that a Steven Spielberg movie is great. Just go watch it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I'd rather find something that like Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. There's something there that we can chew on, even if it maybe doesn't like always work. But the stuff that works, we can really kind of pick apart. Why does it work? Whereas Jaws is like, well, it's Jaws. Of course, it's great.
Right, exactly. I mean, really, the only thing you can do with like a Jaws or E.T. or whatever is sort of relate your story of like watching the movie. But there isn't, like you said, there's not really much else that you can say about it. Whereas, like, yeah, Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, I think a lot of people, again, they ignore it because it's not a part of the MCU or part of the X-Men series of movies, and it's kind of more of a one-off. And so, us being able to talk about it and be like, yeah, you should check this out. This is worth seeing. And then it kind of spurs off into other conversations about the kind of the general state of comic book movies. Yeah, like I agree with you there that like, you can only do so much about how great a Spielberg movie is.
Yeah, and two, I mean, with it's like we were saying with Ghost Rider, it's important to put it into the context of the genre,
Yeah.
where where it falls into place, what came before, what comes after, what it did differently, and that's what I tried to do with my books too. I try to kind of set where we are either in the 60s, 70s, what other genres are kind of what the other genres were like. I give you 4 or 5 reviews of that kind of similar subgenre, so you can get like a good selection of what you can compare it to. So that's my big goal with every book.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I think for again for people listening, if the book is out when this is published, when we post this episode, the link is going to be in the podcast description, and definitely you should check that out because I think again, with so much out there for on Tubi, it's good to have books like yours to kind of allow us to sort of whittle down these choices, and kind of not risk our evening or our night being ruined by a bad choice for a Tubi movie.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. So at this point, yeah, we'll wrap up here. So thank you again, Mitch, for coming on. This was another great conversation,
Thanks again.
and thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.